Today on Rise Up, believers around the world rise up and spread the word. Join us as special correspondent James Pollard discusses obedience and the call to action for all of humanity to find God as true servants of our Lord. Next, religion and human behavior. We discuss the Asch conformity experiment in detail and discuss how people tend to behave. Are we really being true to ourselves? Two worlds collide when religion and academia meet, as we take a look at Professor Massimo Introvigne's breakdown of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, and the dawn of a new era. And finally, we go to medicine of the Mahdis and discuss divine healing for mind, body, and soul. This is Rise Up.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Rise Up. I'm Alia Halal.
Good morning, welcome to Rise Up. I'm Irfan Alamgir.
So today we're going to be discussing a very important theme on our program. This is our morning show that we do on the satellite channel, and we are the companions of the Savior of mankind in this day and age. For anyone tuning in for the first time, we always like to make sure that this is clarified in the intro, who exactly we are, who you're looking at. We are those people that believe in the riser, Abdullah Hashim Abbas Sadiq, who is in fact an eschatological figure that was prophesied to appear to mankind a very long time ago by Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. They actually prophesied the coming of this savior figure who would guide mankind towards Imam al-Mahdi, who would guide us towards the promised kingdom of heaven that Jesus spoke about, or as we call it, the divine just state. We are his companions, and we bring to you his teachings and the various updates of what is going on around the world with our very large global family, our large global community, and that's what we do here.
Exactly. There are so many channels, hundreds and thousands of channels on the satellites, on social media, on the internet. There is a lot of information overload going on, but this is really that voice of reason. This is the voice of God speaking to the people, delivering the message of God's appointed caliph in this day and age, his representative, his vicegerent in the creation. This has included 124,000 prophets and messengers, going back all the way to Adam, the first man created by God, when he gave him authority over the earth, clearly mentioned in the Bible, and then going all the way down to the Prophet Muhammad, who represents that final seal of the prophets, who brought the same message as Adam did before him, ultimately summarized in the statement that God rules the earth through a caliph or a man appointed by him. And this concept is a central concept in our dawah, and it is the supremacy of God, the right of God to choose who rules the earth that he created. And this is the point of our show. This is what we are trying to get across to the audience. We are broadcasting to the entire continent of Africa and Europe. And we also have satellite channels that cover other parts of the world. So the fact that we are saying the same thing in the beginning, it's in the hope that somebody is tuning in for the first time. And when they listen to what we're saying, when they look at the way we are saying it, they understand where we're coming from. So it is really important to emphasize and repeat the message that we are here as bringers of glad tidings, but also as warners. And this is the mission of our master, who is the riser of the family of Muhammad, the promised Mahdi that the Prophet Muhammad mentioned on so many occasions. And he repeatedly emphasized to the people that they must recognize him and pledge allegiance to him when he rises.
And the idea that we want to make sure that we can very, very clearly emphasize in this particular episode is a concept that very interestingly exists in basically every sphere of life. But when it comes to God and when it comes to understanding his representative or his vicegerent, then historically people have been negligent of understanding it properly. But we're now living in a time where we are meant to be understanding it to its full capacity. And that is the idea of obedience and the idea of understanding the rights of God and how we are meant to be giving him his right by recognizing his vicegerent and submitting to God through the man that he has sent. And this is not a new concept that has to be, pointed out here. It's not something very new. This is something that you find in other religions such as Catholicism, you find it in 12 Shia Islam, you find it practically in every faith where there is someone that the people must obey or must submit to. The question is, how do you obey God without obeying the man sent by him? And this is something we wanted to basically highlight today and go into, because without that very key, core foundation of understanding of religion, there's so much that would be missed and become pointless essentially. We find that in the time of Prophet Muhammad, there were those who pledged allegiance to him, and there were those who pledged allegiance to his successor, Imam Ali. But it was due to their lack of obedience that things went awry and things didn't turn out the way they should have. And it became a political issue. And Islam got separated and divided into so many denominations and sects. And the world is in the state that it's in today for that lack of obedience, unfortunately.
Yes, Islam surely was fractured by the disagreements that happened among the very prominent companions of the Prophet Muhammad, companions who had shared meals with him, went to battle with him, and supported him in the propagation of his message. And actually, you know what? In this day and age, never has there been as many tools for us to use in order to spread the word of God. We have satellite channels, we have the internet, we have face-to-face, the traditional way of propagating any kind of faith. But the issue is that there are so many other voices, so many other liars and dajjals out there who come predominantly in the form of the clerics of religion, ironically, the people who should be guiding the people and giving them hope of salvation that comes through a man, that comes through a figure called the Mahdi. And we use the word eschatology a lot. All that means is in the end times, when a new person rises to create a revolution, that person has been in the past Moses, a key figure, and of course Jesus Christ and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is actually going back to something the Prophet Muhammad spoke about, and he appointed not only his direct successor, which was Imam Ali, but he also named the 11 successors that come after him. And he didn't stop there. He then said after them there will be 12 Mahdis, and then he proceeded to name the first 3 of these Mahdis, because the first 3 of them are absolutely crucial in the establishment of the divine just state, which is of course the key mission that the Mahdi comes with. And that key name that we are always trying to emphasize and focus upon is the name of Abdullah, the slave or servant of God, who has come with this document that the Prophet Muhammad left for the Muslims to be able to identify him. And this is something that is irrefutable. The will of the Prophet Muhammad is a protection against misguidance, and indeed the Prophet himself said, those who cling to this will never be led astray. So the man Abdullah has risen. His kunya is Aba as-Sadiq, which means the father of the truthful, and he is that promised qa'im or riser of the family of Muhammad. And it's a very peculiar name and a very particular title, because it is a mission that he comes with, which is to gather the people, to rise up, to unite, and to create under the banner of allegiances to God a divine just state. And this is the man who has arrived. It's a very exciting time for anybody who has been waiting for him to come. Well, the good news is that he is here. The other news is that now you have to reach him by any means necessary. You have to support him with everything that is given to you. The Prophet Muhammad famously said, if it were not for the wealth of Khadija and the sword of Ali, Islam would never have taken root in the Arabian lands. So you have to support him by whatever God has given you. Look in your hands. What have you got from God? Well, whatever it is, you have to put it into practice, you have to work by it, and you have to use it to help the riser who has risen in this day and age to be able to fulfill his mission. And that is a very, very, very great honor. It is an honor that all the prophets and the messengers that lived before have returned to this planet now in order to help fulfill this vision that God always had for the planet, which is that there would be peace, harmony, and prosperity on earth as it is in heaven.
Yes, and there's only one way to do that. There's only one way to achieve that.
Obedience.
Exactly. To achieve that reality, we must know what we are standing for. What exactly is a pledge of allegiance? What exactly does it mean to sell yourself to God? Because essentially that is what a pledge of allegiance means. Essentially it means that you are ready to use whatever it is that you are and that you have in order to serve God. And we've talked before on this program about the idea of freedom, the idea of what it means to be truly free and what it means to be a true servant, what it means to actually worship God, a true worship. And all of these concepts are very important and very necessary, but they become very eroded through time due to those unfortunate non-working scholars that jump in and they infiltrate religions and they add in what they want to and they emphasize aspects of religion that are not as important, or in fact I should say that cannot stand on their own without the key concepts of submission to the man from God or of the successorship of the man of God. And that's the idea of ritualism and how do you pray and how do you fast, and all of these ideas become the focus of religion, unfortunately, when it's actually something much deeper. And we're living in a time where the world is very much in chaos. And there's no way to bring it back to order until we take a step back and we recognize what it is that God actually wants from mankind. Everyone has that responsibility on their shoulders to wake up in the morning and ask themselves, am I doing what God created me for? Or am I just living mindlessly and in obedience to the wrong entity, in obedience to the wrong people? Because ironically, that is the reality, whether we admit it or not, or whether we like it or not. We are all in obedience to someone or something. And we need to understand who that is and what are we spending our years on? What are we spending our lives on? Is it for the reason that God created us for? Or is it for something more insidious and more sinister that has nothing to do with God at all? And we'll finish the years that we've been given, these precious years, doing something that we will regret in the very near future.
Time is of the essence. Time is precious and time is ticking away. We are already, Alia, in November. And I just remember the other day it was June and now we're in November. Time is speeding up. And in fact, the Prophet Muhammad and Jesus Christ both indicated that in the last days, time would evaporate between our hands. And hasn't it, even with all the technological progress that we've made as a species, we are noticing that our time has become even more rare. That ability to just sit down and think things through, that has disappeared from our day.
It's racing in front of your eyes. The minutes are just flying away.
And this is the issue. We have to, in the midst of the storm, find the eye of the storm, because although it lies at the center of the storm, it is that area where there is actually that serenity. And in order to find that serenity or sakina, you have to be able to connect with the messenger of God and the spirit that he embodies. And this is, of course, the true purpose of all religion and the true freedom that we all seek innately. This is the message that we bring. But in order to reach that state of sakina, you have to first obey, and obey until you have perfected obedience in the form of that sujood or that prostration that represents complete obedience or submission. And this is what I think we wanted to really talk about on this particular episode of the Rise Up.
Because there is this very fascinating, huge, gaping hole in the understanding of the people when it comes to religion in general. There are so many parts of history, or so many parts of the true religion, whether you're talking about Christianity or Judaism or Islam, that have been completely forgotten and completely ignored. There are people who come to us, for example, and they'll say to us, oh, you know how you guys say the angels prostrated to Adam? And we say, yes, of course, it's in the Holy Quran, the angels prostrated to Adam. And they'll say, no, but that was just for Adam. Completely disregarding the fact that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family, had said very clearly that in every day and age there has to be an imam, that every day and age has a caliph, and that is widely recognized by scholars.
Very true.
They all agree there has to be a caliph, don't they?
Right. And in the Quran, Aliyah, it says, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, I will put a caliph in the land or establish a caliph in the land. And interestingly, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, actually used the word caliph when he's talking about the Mahdi. This is both in Sunni and Shia narrations. So that same word that was applied to Adam has been applied to the Mahdi, because it makes sense. They have that same spirit of God that was breathed into them. So this is a really important point for you to ponder. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to. Go and find the narrations pertaining to the Mahdi, and he is referred to as the caliph of God, just as Adam is in Surah Al-Baqarah.
Exactly. And we are calling to people to wake up to that understanding, essentially. What is it that is required from us as people? It is the exact same principle that has always been there, has always been present, and it is to find Who is Adam in this day and age? Who is the Caliph in this day and age? The Caliph that was promised would always be there. Who is our Caliph right now? And what are we required to do? Because this Caliph or this vicegerent of God has been sent for our benefit, for our guidance. But it cannot be that we do what many people are hoping to do, which is sit back and wait for the Caliph to come in and solve everything for them. There is a very well established two-way contract between mankind and God. And in order to fulfill our role as His creation that worship Him truly, we need to do our part. And that is the exact thing that the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did when they all rushed to him in the beginning, in the onset of Islam, when those true companions of his came to him and did not leave his side, but rather they supported him in everything they had.
When the need was the most dire and desperate.
Exactly. When the people were very few who were willing to support God or be there for him, that was when you found names that now can never be forgotten from the books of history, like Salman, like Abu Zar, like Miqdad. Of course, Ali ibn Abi Talib. You will always hear those names that were
Lady
right
Khadija.
next to Lady Khadija, of course. Let's not forget the female companions as well. These great people, we will never forget them because they did something that no one else was willing to do. They went against the norm for what they believed in. And they decided to obey God a true obedience. And that's what we wanted to focus on today. And that's something that Brother Ari Abruni in Canada actually was also spreading the word about. Back a few days ago, he actually went around and he put some posters up where he was living, and it's a very beautiful act of support for the sake of this call. James Pollard, our special correspondent, covered the story. So we can go ahead and see what James has to say about the concept of obedience and Ari Abruni's contribution in spreading the word.
In Abba al-Sadiq's ever-evolving call on propagation of faith with the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, the new manifesto today is calling to the supremacy of God in order to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is through the call to gather together like-minded believers and supporters from all walks of life and form a creeds, like in the time of Jesus, mentioned in the book of Acts, who worked tirelessly to put humanity first. The undercurrent of this premise is rooted in one profound concept, and that is the obedience to the divine monarch of our time. Just like the people in Acts, the obedience to a CEO of a business or a pledge of fealty to a political party leader, so what about a messenger sent by God to rule the world? What could be more important as an honor? From the book of John, Jesus reminded his apostles of this universal law. You are my friends if you do what I command. Brother and supporter of the riser of truth, Ari Abruni from Canada, continues to act in obedience to the will of his Father to propagate and spread the divine message of this time. He has already clarified there is a clear and present solution for humanity being manifested by Abba Sadiq, the divine monarch of our age, through the distribution of posters. And now Ari has gone a step further and come out in public to declare the importance of obedience to this leader of our faith, the true Pope of our time, Abba Sadiq. In essence, this means that by trusting in his guidance and kingship, we can work together to build that same divine just state that Jesus had promised for his flock. Abba Sadiq is that divine conductor of the orchestra we need to obey and take guidance from in order for the mission to be successful. In the book of Jeremiah, I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. As only a man sent by God is inspired to know which instrument or instruments need to be played in the right key and at the right time in order to produce the harmonic notes for the establishment of the divine just state. So if we act of our own volition and are not obedient to the conductor of this divine orchestra and decide to play a note out of tune or at the wrong time, harmony will break down and discord will result in the symphony of the orchestra, or divine just state today. As Jesus made it abundantly clear, those that say they want to support the mission of God but do not do the work of God and refuse to obey the will of God's messenger and his command, especially in this age, have fallen into a devilish and deviant trap. From the book of Matthew, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. So the divine conductor of our age, Abba Sadiq, whose inspiration gives him the most apt talent to compose the correct symphony and bring it into fruition. Like the conductor in that same orchestra, he does not seek his own glory and often faces away from the audience, instead directing the movements of his companions of that orchestra. Therefore, he often goes unnoticed, but without his divine inspiration, his companions would not know how to play their notes in symphony, and disharmony of the divine just state would result, and it would no longer be divine. As Lao Tzu clarified, the obedient companions of the riser of truth would often perform the works on his behalf. The leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." So, by obedience and trust in and support for the riser of truth in this day and age, with everything we have of our own selves and possessions, we can hope to be in harmony with his divine symphony. From the book of Acts, neither were there any among them that lacked, for as many as were possessions or lands or houses sold by them, and brought the prices of the things that were sold and laid them down at the feet of the apostles. And distribution was made unto every man according as he had need. Imam Hussein, from him is peace, the successor of Imam Hassan, from the unbroken chain of successors of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who died to raise up the name of God Most High in the bloodbath of Karbala, made it abundantly clear when he asked his people if there was anyone to help us. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works, the book of James. So evidently it is imperative for humanity to understand today that just as before, the key commandment of God is always to obey the divine messenger sent in every age. This is because they have the Spirit of God with them to enforce them, and therefore they will not take us into misguidance or lead us astray from God and truth. From the Quran, O you who believe, obey God and his messenger and those with authority among you. So according to the narrations of Prophet Muhammad, when he was asked about those who were vested in authority, whose obedience has been conjoined to that of God, he stated, they are my caliph and the imam of the Muslim after me. These are the same infallible guides for humanity mentioned in Prophet Muhammad's Holy Will and Last Testament that come after him from an unbroken chain of successors. These are the true scholars of religion who will not take us into misguidance, unlike the fallible, misguiding, self-appointed or elected religious elders, priests or mufti or sheikh who have no appointment from God. So, it is through these acts of work or worship that brings the spark of life to our faith. It was and never is sufficient to simply say we profess belief, but do not work by the guiding divine principle or messenger of our age. The goal of religion is to find that man, that veil behind which is the Spirit of God, and to prostrate to him by obedience to him and to give victory to him. That is the entirety of religion. So the true worship or prostration to God is in fact through recognizing the man of God and then to obey him in all things. And he is the divine king of our age and is the key to our salvation. In fact, all messengers sent by God were supposed to rule in their day and age by God, but were not empowered by their so-called supporters. Jesus was not supposed to be crucified, but was supposed to rule as a king and make the world a better place. Even his own disciples were shortcomers, and when asked by Jesus to follow him, they said, if you command us to do so, they would do the same. True obedience comes from the submission of the heart to the man of God, as his will is the only will of the one true absolute God, so is pure from selfish pride, envy or greed. In the book of John, Jesus clarified, for I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. Hope truly springs eternal, as we should seek not just salvation for ourselves, but work through the command of this divine messenger, as he seeks the betterment for the whole of humanity. It is only then through this obedience, as God knows best, that the utopian ideal state of Socrates can be fulfilled in reality, and we can end the tyranny and suffering that has reigned over this earth for so many centuries. To obey is to serve, and the foremost servant of God is Abdullah, or servant of God, Abdullah Hashim, the second Mahdi, who has come and synchronized his will with that of the one true God, and is therefore the perfect reflection of God to face mankind today. Abdullah is the servant who has dissolved his own will, embodying the true attributes of God in the highest possible way, showing no resistance from his own self, so the divine energy flows into him and he is most capable to lead us in the way of truth, peace and light. It is thus guaranteed that victory will be achieved with God and his messenger. So at this critical and pivotal stage, when the world is full of darkness and despair with World War III, a massive threat, so you should now be asking not what God can do for you, but what can you do for God instead?
And that was our special correspondent, James Pollard, bringing up a very, very important topic and subject, and that is the idea that we are meant to be supporting God in this day and age and not expecting that God fixes everything for us. It's a time when the people have to rise up to the test that's being given in front of us of, are we going to allow ourselves to be submerged in the darkness, in the ignorance, or will we rise up and learn more about what we're supposed to do and read more and understand more and look for God in this day and age? Rather than hoping that everything turns out okay, there are those people out there who are the truth seekers, who are researchers, who are investigating a better reality, who know that there has to be better than this. And those are the ones who end up ultimately coming across the riser Abu Sadiq and saying, who is this man? And usually that's how the story starts, right? We always hear that part of the story from a lot of the believers who end up pledging their allegiance to this call. They say, and then I just stumbled across Abu Sadiq on YouTube, on the Mahdi Has Appeared channel, and I said to myself, who is this man? How does he talk like this?
Yes, so many people are finding the truth and they're becoming enamored and mesmerized by the words of the riser of the family of Muhammad, because they're the words that emanate from the Holy Spirit. That same Holy Spirit that was breathed into Adam is now with Abu Sadiq, which means that he is the caliph that God established in the land. Therefore, you have to give him your undivided attention, and if you're able to do that, and this is why we talk about meditation actually, which is the calming of the mind so that you can focus it clearly on a single point of attention. And where better to put that single pointed attention than the Caliph of God, because he is your savior. He is the one that is going to break those shackles, loosen those ties and chains and blindfolds so that you can appreciate the truth.
Yes.
Now, James ended that segment very well where, he said, ask not, where he took that famous quote and turned it into, ask not what God can do for you, but what you can do for God. But if we really break it down to the brass tacks of the situation, what is really happening is, and this is where we talked about the allegory of the cave, or Plato's cave. If you type it into YouTube, there's some very good videos that explain exactly what we mean by this. But really, it's us who are shackled and chained, and the man from God appears as a free individual, as a free human being, who then comes and loosens and unties those chains and breaks them so that we can finally rise up and see the truth and see things as they really are. We cannot do that until we are obedient to him. He will explain to us exactly how we break out of these shackles. We have to listen to him. We have to obey his instructions.
We have
right?
to.
His instruction is this, right? So you are tied up and chained up. Now he's telling you, move your hand like this, then do this, then do this. We cannot do it ourselves. He is the one who gives us those instructions. And if we listen faithfully and obey, then we will loosen ourselves quicker than if we keep struggling, because it's like a spider's web. The more you struggle and struggle and struggle, actually, the more tightly, exactly, it gets more tighter and it gets more difficult to escape. Or the Venus flytrap, another very good example. In the Venus flytrap, when the insect lands in, initially the trap closes, okay? And then the more the insect struggles inside of the Venus flytrap, this is a stimulus to the plant to then crush it even tighter.
Wow.
So this is our situation in the world. We've been caught in the Venus flytrap. The more we struggle, the more we go about our own thoughts and our own desires and what we think is right, and what we do what we want, the worse things will get. We have to obey the person who is free, right? He's free. He knows how to break free, and he's teaching us how to attain that freedom from that spider's web or that Venus flytrap. So Abba Sadiq has emerged. Great people have recognized him because of the souls they possess, because his soul is the spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit. And those who really listen to his words and obey his words are those people who will break free out of the enslavement mentally and physically in the material world.
And again, I have to say, the analogies that you bring up and how you depict the truth by giving it that little parable next to it, we really have to collect them somewhere. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start writing a book about it.
Let's do it.
But yeah, look, in terms of what we have to do now in this day and age and why it is so important that we talk about knowing God and worshipping Him by obeying the man from Him. This is not something, like I said before, that's very new. This is something that's always been expected from mankind. And if you go through history and you look at the stories of the prophets and messengers, then this is the incredible thing, the incredible phenomenon that you can take what I'm saying right now and go ahead and test it for yourselves. Any point in Scripture where God is disappointed with the people, or when the people have let Him down, or when a great mistake has been highlighted, it has always been due to a lack of obedience.
Yes.
It has always been that the people did not obey the instruction, or that the people were not heeding God's commands through the man that He has appointed. That is when they let Him down, and that is when the consequences came as well. And it happened all the way from the time of Adam, when the people were instructed, or the angels were instructed to prostrate. Disobedience from Iblis was what led him to being expelled.
Yes.
It wasn't because of a lack of worship. It wasn't because he forgot to pray. It wasn't because he didn't read the Quran or wasn't listening to what's in the Bible or any of the like. It was because he didn't obey the commandment given to him, which was to prostrate.
So true.
And that's only one example. There are so many other examples. There's the examples of the brothers of Joseph. They were commanded to heed the instruction of their father and to take care of Joseph and to see him as that brother that is a little bit different because he was chosen by God to be the future vicegerent. They did not want to obey that. And what did that lead to? Terrible consequences for them, which ultimately they were forgiven for, but it led to the spiraling downward of their ultimate fates as the brothers of Joseph or as the sons of Jacob. And then you have the famous example of the children of Israel being told by Moses, peace be upon him, God is instructing us to enter the city. And they knew there was this enemy on the other side that they'd have to oppose. And they said, Moses, you and your Lord go into the city. We will wait here for you to go ahead and do the work for us.
Clear act of defiance and disobedience. And
exactly.
Its consequences, its karmic consequences, were very, very swift,
extreme.
Weren't they?
And they lasted for many years on. It wasn't something quick and a quick rebuttal and everything is fine again. It's something that has very dire consequences.
Yes.
Why? Because the whole point of religion and worship is obedience. And unfortunately, that stance of the children of Israel is what we find right now in the Muslim nation as well, where they say, go you and your Mahdi and solve the issues in the Middle East and we will wait here. And that is exactly what they say when you present proofs to a people and they say, I cannot argue with you. Everything you say makes complete sense. Your evidence is so strong, but you go ahead and do the work. I'm going to stay back. Is that a true Muslim? Is that a true believer in God?
Yeah, no, I really like the way you started things off and the way you took it to the Israelites at the end. Now, if you think about the example that Alia gave of Prophet Adam, when God commanded the angels to prostrate, actually their ranks were determined by the ones who prostrated first, the foremost, the first to arrive in obedience. Now, when Alia was talking, this image of Iblis came into my head, and I pictured Iblis sitting on a prayer mat with his prayer beads, just doing dhikr. You know, Allah's great.
Which is what he did.
Which is what he did, and he did a lot of it. And through his different ways of worshipping God, he attained a very high rank. However, when put to the test of the Caliph of God, oh boy, did he fail abysmally. You see, at that moment in time, the ranks of the angels were determined by those who had the least resistance to the command of God. They prostrated. A prostration, of course, means complete submission, sami'na wa ata'na, which is that thing in the Quran that means we hear and we obey, right? You hear, you obey. Until it gets to the stage where your life is on the line. And in that moment, it has to be a complete submission. And it really is.
Yes.
Obedience is a question of life or death.
Wow.
Let's forward from the Israelites, where Aliyah left off, and go fast forward to the time of the Prophet Muhammad. We have two very important case studies. We have the Battle of Badr. And in the Battle of Badr, there were 313 companions with the Holy Prophet Muhammad who confronted the Qurayshis, and they were outnumbered in a big way. But in that moment, these 313 companions who came to the battlefield with these little sticks and
they didn't
tree
even have
branches.
good weapons. They just had...
Some didn't have any weapons,
yes.
right? Whereas the Meccans were armed and they had cavalry and weapons and bows and arrows and swords and everything that you can imagine that you would have back in the day. But there was obedience among the ranks. The Prophet organized his troops and they obeyed his instructions and they said, Sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and we obey, and they were granted victory.
So beautiful.
Now you move forward to the next battle. So now the Muslims are confident. They're like, yes, God is definitely with us.
Yes.
We won against all the odds, and they did. And then we come to the famous battle of Uhud. And in Uhud, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he organizes his troops and he gives them all specific instruction about their particular role in this battle. Now the Meccans have been humiliated. They've come inspired, they're vindicated. They want to come and destroy and crush the Muslims. So now they are even more motivated than they were before in the Battle of Badr, when they thought it would be a cakewalk and they would annihilate the Muslims from the face of the earth. Unfortunately, this time the people did not obey the command of the Prophet. And when that happens, it has repercussions and consequences. He had specifically told certain groups of people, the archers, to remain in a specific post. Don't leave this position. As the Muslims were moving forward and they were winning, they were pushing back the Meccans, the archers saw what was going on and they saw the war booty appear. Iblis came and he made this apparition. Look, you're missing out. This is an easy victory. God is with you. But they forgot the command of the messenger of God, the commander-in-chief, the imam of the age, the caliph of God in that time, which was the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family. They left their positions and God's judgment was swift. In fact, it was their own actions that they bore the consequences of. They left their positions, and a man by the name of Khalid ibn Walid was able to come around the side and take that flank out, and then it resulted in a crushing victory for the defeat for the Muslims and a victory for the enemies of God.
Despite the fact that they were more in number at this point than they had been in the Battle of Badr.
Yes, it should have been an easier day at the office, but it wasn't. And it was because of disobedience. And this is where that absolute submission is even more critical. If you put yourself in the battlefield of the mind, now the jihad of the nafs, it's even more important to obey the instructions of God's caliph. You know, he may not tell you to pray 400 rak'ahs a day. He may say something simple to you, like do this or do that. And you may think, this doesn't seem like it's the right thing to do. But in that moment, that doubt, that resistance is really going to be the undoing of you, as it was for the Muslims in the Battle of Uhud. And we cannot let that happen again in this day and age.
Absolutely. That is such an incredible comparison of two different battles. And look at that. Look at the fact that it is so discouraging and sad to see what happened and how the Prophet's rights, peace be upon him and his family, were taken from him by his own people in the incident of Uhud, where the people decided to abandon him and he was left with hardly anyone. And those who stayed with him were the likes of Ali ibn Abi Talib and those of great faith, while the others were not on par and they were misled. However, when you do look at the Battle of Badr and you realize the odds and how low they were in favor of the Muslims, and yet they were able to succeed, they were able to achieve their victory, it just gives us also that inspiration and that hope that if we obey God and if we walk alongside him in his footsteps, then there is nothing that cannot be accomplished. There is nothing that we cannot see come to fruition. If we sincerely work together and believe with all our hearts in what we are standing by and obey God a true obedience, then what will happen essentially, is that God's promise will be fulfilled. The kingdom of heaven will be on earth as it is in heaven. And we will actually see a place on this planet where God's promise is fulfilled to His people, where they can live in peace and harmony, like they did in Eden in the time of Adam, as it should be. And that's what we will never stop working towards, because that is what God is asking from us at the moment.
Yes. And Ali, another very important truth and insight becomes apparent when you talk about it. It's really not about the numbers.
No.
It's not about quantity. It's about the quality of the believers.
Exactly.
And the quality of those 313 companions in Badr was far superior to the quantity of the companions and soldiers who were present in Uhud. And this is a recurring theme, actually, in the Abrahamic scriptures. And there is a famous individual by the name of Gideon in the Bible.
Right.
And God actually says to him something very interesting. He says the soldiers are too many. And again, I'm slightly paraphrasing, but the idea is that God tells him there's too many soldiers and the people will become prideful because they will say, we are the ones who got victory in this day and age. And then God puts them through a test. And this test is drinking from a river. And then through this test, God actually whittles their numbers down, and Gideon is forced to send his large quantity of soldiers back, so that a small quality of true submitters, of true men of obedience remain. And that was sufficient for God. And this is what you are expected to do in this day and age. God wants the people of pure sincerity and quality to come forward and join Him in building that divine just state. He doesn't want the people who have ifs, ands, or buts and different thoughts and desires and resistances and suspicions and all these other negative things. Once you believe this is the Caliph of God, you must do as the angels do and submit completely and obey the Imam of your time.
And then great things will happen.
Great things will happen.
And obedience is something, like we said before, that everyone does do. It just happens to be that we don't all obey the same entity or the same powers or the same sources of authority. And it is something you cannot get away from. Anyone who is on this earth, on this planet right now, is in a state of obedience to something or someone. Everyone has an imam, whether they know it or not, whether they realize it or not. And now the question is, who is your imam? Who is your qibla? Who is the person that you see as worthy of your submission, as worthy of your obedience? Because that obedience is a very sacred thing that God has allowed that the human being enjoy. We are allowed to enjoy the beautiful sanctity of obedience to God. But when you give it to the wrong person, then it has to be recognized and quickly fixed, because that's something that's very, very wrong and takes away the rights of God from him, which obviously he takes great offense to. Speaking of which, we have coming up a segment that talks about obedience and conformity. You've talked about this before, Dr. Irfan, and in this particular segment, Dr. Irfan goes more into depth when it comes to this experiment that took place, and it's a very enlightening experiment, because it really shows you how people behave and how human beings instinctively react to certain factors in their environments, and how we have to be ahead of that, and we have to believe in being better than what our instincts may lead us to. So let's go ahead and see what you had to say about that, Dr. Irfan, regarding the Asch conformity experiment.
Today we're diving into one of the most intriguing studies in psychology, the Asch conformity experiment, and exploring how it links to the pursuit of truth. We'll see how the experiment reveals the power of social pressure, and we'll discuss how freedom and truth often require us to be willing to stand apart from mainstream beliefs. In today's age, this includes recognizing the Imam of our time and understanding the guidance of the riser, Abdullah Hashim Abba al-Sadiq, the vicegerent appointed by divine will, as recorded in the final testament of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family. In the 1950s, a psychologist by the name of Solomon Asch wanted to understand just how much people would be willing to go in order to conform to the opinions of others, even when they recognize something to be false. His question was simple but powerful. How does the pressure to fit in influence our choices? And the results revealed a lot about human nature and our tendency to go along with the crowd. Asch's experiment was simple but very insightful. He placed participants in a group where they were shown cards with lines of varying lengths. The task was easy. Each person had to say which of the 3 lines matched a single line shown on another card. But here's the twist. Most of the people in each group were actors who were instructed to deliberately give the wrong answer on purpose. When it was their turn, the real subject hears all the other participants choosing clearly a wrong answer. And the findings were striking. About 75% of the people went along with the group's answer at least once, despite the fact that they could see that it was incorrect. The desire to conform, even at the expense of truth, is a powerful force. So what lessons can we take from this experiment in human behavior? Well, the Asch experiment shows us that finding and holding on to the truth often requires going against the grain. It's a lesson the prophets and the messengers of God frequently demonstrate in their stories. Prophets like Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all, did not conform to the prevailing beliefs of their times. In fact, they delivered a message which directly opposed the status quo, even when it meant challenging the beliefs held by society or mainstream institutions of religion. They show us that truth isn't found by simply following the crowd. It requires us to follow divine guidance, even if it means standing alone. So in terms of finding the truth in our time, we can conclude that just as past generations had messengers to guide them, we too are guided in our time by a vicegerent appointed through divine will. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family left a will that clearly outlined his successors, and according to this will, the riser, Abdullah Hashim Aba al-Sadiq, is the vicegerent of our age. He invites us to see beyond traditional mainstream religious institutions and understand that true guidance can sometimes go against conventional wisdom and conventional interpretations that have settled over time. Embracing the truth means freeing ourselves from conforming to popular religious ideas and instead seeking the guidance of the living Imam of our time. But why do people conform so easily? Asch found that people have a deep desire to fit in, which often leads them to abandon their own convictions, to follow the group. This study reminds us to question whether our beliefs and practices come from true conviction or from conforming to popular religious authorities or social pressures. True freedom, especially in the spiritual sense, often requires us to break away from institutionalized beliefs and seek guidance directly from the divine representative of our age. The riser, Abdullah Hashim Aba al-Sadiq, has emerged in this day and age to revive the pure and true religion. By following the Imam of our time, we are called to a path that challenges conformity to mainstream religious doctrines and instead embraces a direct living connection to divine guidance. Just as the prophets challenged the religious norms of their day, the riser calls us to break free from what has become mere ritual or tradition and to seek the freedom that comes from authentic spiritual truth. The Asch conformity experiment shows how social pressure can cloud our perception of truth. But the lives of the prophets and the message of the riser, Aba al-Sadiq, show us that the path to true freedom requires courage. The courage to resist conforming to popular beliefs and to follow divine truth, even when it sets us apart. As we reflect on this today, let's remember that true freedom means the courage to find and follow the divine guidance meant for us by the Lord of the worlds. And in our time, this guidance comes through the Imam of the age, the riser Abdullah Hashim Aba al-Sadiq. Finding truth is never easy, but it brings us closer to the ultimate purpose of our lives, to live freely and faithfully in alignment with God's will.
I really love that segment. It's such an incredible wake-up call to anyone out there who might not be aware of the fact that we can make that mistake as people. We can neglect to stand for what we believe in, what we think is true, and you might see it as a very small thing, just the answer of what number do you see, or how long is the line, which one is the smallest line, or which one is the biggest line, or whatever. You might see that as a very small matter, but it's the principle behind it. That if you're unable to, at that moment, say what you think, out of fear of the mob, or fear of not fitting in, then imagine on a greater scale how that could translate into something much more sinister, where you could in fact neglect and cast aside something that you truly believe in, something that you're meant to be able to give your lives for. As people, we should be able to have something we live for and are willing to die for as well. And if we don't have that, then we are not really truly human. In fact, we are no different from animals.
Yes, and certainly there is no such thing as the wisdom of the crowds. It's actually the ignorance of the crowds in most cases, and this is something the scripture testifies to, that it's always a minority of people who see the world and who recognize the ills of the world and then go in search on their own on that hero's journey, which actually begins as a very lonely journey, but it ends with finding God, his messenger, and his community, and then one finds that that community to which conforming is actually very necessary.
Yes.
What we're saying is what Alia said before, which is that who is your imam? Because you have one. It could be a celebrity, it could be an actor, it could be a sports star, it could even be these failed, corrupt politicians that go through and take leadership and then repeat the same mistakes and the same cycle of problems and then come back. There are people who actually have politicians as their imams. Now, we are saying that if you have to conform to God. You have to conform to the vicegerent of God. You have to recognize somebody and then obey that person until they can take the shackles off your mind, body, and spirit. So the first step is to recognize who you are obedient to and why, and then find God's spirit in this time, the man who has his spirit with him, and then conform to him and his instruction, because it's God's instruction. This is the crucial step that we have to recognize. Everyone has an imam. Who is your imam? Is it God or is it somebody other than God? If it's somebody other than God, then we have a really big problem. This is a simple insight that you have to recognize, because the first part of fixing a problem is to recognize that it exists.
And I think that these experiments on human behavior and how people behave and how they react to certain situations, they're very important to look into, because it really makes you wonder, why? Why would people do that? And I was thinking about it while I was listening to your words on how the experiment played out and how we should be careful of not to fall into that mistake. It crossed my mind. I was wondering, why? Why would we instinctively do that? And the only answer I can come up with is, well, it seems like there's a lot of fear of not fitting in, or fear of being told that you're wrong, or of being ostracized, being different. Yes. It's scary to not fit in. And conformity is a safe, warm feeling where you know that you're safe because no one will attack you now or oppose you.
Yes.
There's no opposition anymore. Yes. There's no confrontation. So you might as well stick with the status quo so that you don't upset anyone. And while that's a very comforting feeling, superficially, deep down, there can never be that sense of relief or satisfaction of being authentic.
Yes.
Of being real to yourself.
This is the thing. It's actually, Alia, a survival mechanism, because there is generational trauma from conforming. What did they used to do to people who didn't conform to the mainstream ideas of Christianity, for example, even in this country?
Right.
In the Middle Ages, they were rounded up and burnt at the stake.
Right.
I mean, this is not exaggeration. This really did happen. It happened here, it happened in the United States, and it happened all over the world. When people begin to stand away from the crowd, and again, this is that hero's journey archetype coming in again. There's always this journey which involves some kind of mountain. And of course, we know the Prophet Muhammad used to meditate in caves and mountains. Because when you travel on the mountain, there's two things. Number one, it's an uphill journey. It's difficult. It's a lonely journey. But when you reach to that top of the mountain, you can actually see the full picture. And when you see the full picture and you see the people and the way they're acting and behaving, you recognize that they are living according to an agenda, according to a programmed state of mind where they serve the system that feeds them. And to stand aloof of this is not easy to do. And to be rejected is very, very painful. And this is something that you have to endure on the hero's journey. And this has always been the case with every prophet and messenger. They had to leave the crowd that they were in. That kind of mass psychosis that exists has been written of extensively, and its pathology, how it actually negatively impacts you. If you're somebody who has read the writings of Carl Jung, he used to say that it is imperative for every human being with a conscience to now and again find solitude and to really contemplate and look at things in society that are happening, to reflect on their own experiences and see how we can correct our ability to perceive, because even our very perception becomes the perception of the crowd. It gets distorted, and it's like the reverse hive mentality, where if the queen bee of the hive is corrupt and evil, I mean, I can't think of another word for it, because that's what it is, then you will become like that queen bee that you have pledged allegiance to and that you are looking upon as your imam. However, if that bee is noble, and if that bee is pure and knowledgeable and wise and merciful and kind, then you will likewise reflect their qualities. It's just about a matter of perspective.
Exactly. The second analogy of the day, that's brilliant and really hits home. Because imagine that. Imagine not being able to emulate someone who is truly from God. That is a very horrifying existence. And let's just realize it for what it is. If a person wants to believe that it is better to basically conform with an idea that they don't even believe in, or with something that they know is not true, something that doesn't strike them as the truth that they would die for, and they want to still stick by it and they want to still support it, then by all means, that's the beauty of the situation. There is freedom of choice. This is the entire test of this realm we're in right now. And if you want to go ahead and support something that you're not believing in fully, that you're not fully convinced with, then you can, if it feels good for you to be part of the conforming mainstream ideology that you know is not true. But the price of that is you cannot say that you are an authentic person who is sincerely a believer in God and God alone. You can't say that, because then you cannot, like Jesus said, you cannot serve two masters.
Exactly.
You would have to admit that you are conforming for your own comfort's sake and accept that and be genuine about it. And that's the other alternative that's difficult, you have to fight the status quo, you have to stand up for what you believe in, and you have to state it openly and know that it comes with a price. The price of being ostracized, the price of being hurt, the price of losing loved ones. But what matters is that you know what you're doing and you stand up for what you want. Do you want to conform, or do you want to stand up for something that is true and be a part of something that is better? That's the choice that a person is faced with in this world. And waking up to knowing that you have that choice is the first step to becoming an authentic, true human being. Realize that you have that choice and make it. Don't just live in that hamster wheel life where you wake up every morning and do the same thing and go to bed at night with the same issues and problems in your mind, but step back and realize that you are an entity that was created with a purpose, and find your purpose and figure it out. And if you are sincerely wanting to find God, you'll find yourselves coming back to the riser Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq, who is such a unique individual that has successfully freed the people who believe in him from these shackles in their minds. It's incredible.
And it's a natural attraction. It's like, have you seen that experiment with the iron filings and magnets, and how you just put the iron filings in and they just gravitate towards the magnet? Well, it's like that. If your iron filings have got impurities in them, for example, lead, other elements that are not pure in their nature, then you will not be attracted towards the kind of the family of Muhammad. But if you take out those defects from your character, if you're able to conduct self-analysis, and by the way, Imam Hassan al-Askari said, those people who do not do self-analysis are not from us. So this idea of analyzing yourself, looking at the defects that exist within your personality and character, and then removing them. If you remove them and then you watch and you drink from the water of Abu Sadiq, which is knowledge which he provides for you, then you will benefit from it. You know, a lot of the times people come in, they're full of these scholars of religion, for example, they're full of corruptions, and they come and they see what is in themselves. and they reflect back what they see. And the proof of God will reflect your own reality back to you. But if you're sincere and you're pure, the image you will see when you look at him is light. And you will naturally gravitate towards him because you are a pure soul and he is the purest of souls, and like attracts like.
That is so true. It really depends on what's within you. If you are receptive to that beautiful knowledge he is presenting, you will take from it, you will let it into yourself, and you will feel the benefit of it. And if you are not receptive and you are pushing away whatever is good, then you will not be able to accept it. And that is the unfortunate state that we found was the case of Iblis and those who followed him. It's not, again, we have to say this over and over, to reject God is not to stop praying and stop fasting and break the rules. Rejection of God is to reject the man he has sent. Of course, we're not saying you should break rules. We're saying that it's a much deeper concept than just a superficial disobedience. It's a very intrinsic disobedience, and that has to be known and recognized, and action has to be taken in terms of that principle. And there are those brothers and sisters that we have around the world that we present to you with great honor and with great pride in them and with great love for them, that they are those who decided that despite their societal norms, despite the fact that mainstream institutions of religion are basically shackling them down and judging them and harassing them for not being the way that they expect them to be, they decided to rise up from that and to live their authentic truth of what is truly from God and to know how to worship God truly. And I'm talking now about our brothers and sisters in Malaysia.
Yes.
We've been talking about their case for a bit here on Rise Up, and we've been following their story closely and trying to make sure that we don't miss any of the updates and we don't miss out on giving you the updates. And a great thing took place recently where Amnesty International got quite involved in a very, I would say in a very open way. Instead of before, it was just a matter of mentioning what was happening every now and then, or sort of like mentioning the name of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. Now they are actively at the forefront, speaking out against what happened with our beloved brother Zulkifli and stating that they are against it, which is a very great victory for anyone who believes in justice, for anyone who believes in standing up for your rights. It's a big thing that took place from Amnesty International, and we're so grateful to them.
Yeah, no, thank you to Amnesty International. They really have lived up to their reputation in identifying this issue and highlighting it on a global level. They are, of course, a global organization, and to collaborate and work with them has been a pleasure. And I know that Hadil and the members of our religion who interact with them have been very, very moved by their willingness to lend themselves as a platform to highlight and the injustices that have taken part in Malaysia, which have really been draconian and extremely surprising to me, because I thought Malaysia was a very tolerant country, and we found out to the contrary, and all of the warts have come out. And yes, a big thank you to Amnesty.
Exactly. So our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator, Hadil Al-Khuli, sat with me earlier and we discussed Amnesty International's help and support regarding our beloved brother Zulkifli and the injustice that he had to face. So let's go ahead and see that conversation that we had. Hadil, thank you so much for joining us here on Rise Up. We really wanted to talk to you as our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator, who is actively involved in dealing with these cases of injustice that are being met by the members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And we know that the most recent one took place in Malaysia. You have more intel on what's happening and how we're trying to help our members, and who else is really actively involved in raising their voices in support of them. So can you shed some light on that for us, please?
Yes, so the big thing that happened 2 days ago was Amnesty International Malaysia releasing a statement and talking about the case of Zulkifli, who was the 60-year-old man who was the member of the faith. So what does that mean and why is that significant? So when the case happened, the Malaysian authorities in the dark arrested Zulkifli. Nobody knew anything about him. In a matter of days, charged him and released the statement in the media and handed down a sentence to him, which was 6 months in prison. So there was no trial, there was no transparency. Everything happened so quickly. And the next day, of course, we had no contact with Zulkifli except So we knew that the authorities, that they went to his house, that they raided the house, that they arrested them. But from that point on, it was complete blackout. So there was no news. We didn't know anything about him until the next day. We hear the news from Malaysian press that charges were pressed and that he was sentenced to 6 months in jail and a fine. So that happened completely unchallenged. Now, what was worse, that after that, the Malaysian authorities, the religious department, they thought it was completely okay to put Zulkifli in handcuffs and put him in front of an army of press and cameras and literally, Alia, parade him in front of all types of Malaysian media, mass media, and portray him as a criminal.
Yes.
And again, unchallenged. And that news was then all over Malaysian TV, radio, all types of press, any type of media. And so the narrative that was going on was that this was a person who was propagating dubious teachings or heretical teachings. Now, until that point, the discourse was all in favor of the Sharia court and completely defaming Zulkifli and the religion and spreading lies. Until that point, there was no voice of anyone challenging what they've did in terms of the legality of it, the process of it, and also in terms of the truth of what actually happened and what is the faith propagating.
The portrayal of what actually happened, it was very strange. It wasn't even accurate to the facts.
No, it wasn't accurate. First off, Zulkifli wasn't propagating the faith. Again, even if he was, that was completely within his rights. If we're talking about freedom of religion, that's enshrined in the Constitution. It is your right to manifest your faith, public, private, alone, in a community. So that's the first thing. But even then, he was in his home. He was talking to his son. So imagine the next day you have like a policeman storming into your house and arresting you and your wife and your daughter. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that, again, what they were saying, even on what they were saying are Sharia offenses, are things that are not even propagated by the faith.
Yes.
Right? So again, it's like a propaganda that was completely, again, unchallenged, that was one-sided, and where they really thought they could do this to a 60-year-old man, and that's okay, and they're just going to get away with it. And
no one will question it or anything.
Nobody would question, nobody would say, what are you doing?
That by itself is very horrifying, by the way. That
Of
they
course.
thought that they could do that and it's fine and no one will challenge it.
Yes, and you know, this is a man who, as we were saying, is a firefighter. So a person who has done service to his country, to the people in his country, and to be treated in this way, and to think that they can just do that, and not have people standing up and say, you have no right to do that. Aslan, religious authorities from the onset have no right to interpret God's laws, that just as a basis. Let alone now to go out and snatch people and drag them out of their homes, and then on top of that, of course, it's extreme and it's unconstitutional, it's illegal, and it's against Islam to begin with. So it's us who are saying you are the one who is un-Islamic.
Exactly.
You are the one who is defying the words of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad by going and terrorizing an elderly man and dragging people out of their homes and charging them overnight, and then thinking it's okay to come out on mass media and portray them like that. Like, what insanity is that? So yeah, they did that, and as with all members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, the leader of our faith is a man from God who is very jealous over his people and would never be quiet over something like this. And as we've seen in previous cases, if one hair of his Ansar were touched, he would flip the earth upside down and make sure everybody knows about it and made sure that their rights are restored. And so it's the same thing with that case. And it so happened that in a climate, in the current political climate in Malaysia, people are very scared to touch the subject of religious freedom. So you have obviously lawyers, you have civil society organizations, but they also are suffering from a climate that's very repressive, and anybody who speaks out against the religious institutions is criminalized, is censored. So it's a very dangerous climate, and the lawyer even that we are working with, she herself had death threats before for speaking out against religious scholars. I mean, she was telling me she had bombs put in her car. Wow. Because she dared to challenge the religious authorities. So in a climate like that, you would think that they would be very scared to talk about this case, and we were told it would be very difficult to find a lawyer or to find an organization who would actually speak up. And so God made it that way, that the biggest international human rights organization in the whole world, Amnesty International in Malaysia, decides to release a statement and decides to challenge the religious authorities. Alia, they issued the statements on Facebook, and then they issued the statements on X, and what they've did, that they condemned obviously the arrest, but on top of that they tagged the religious authorities, directly addressing them and saying that you need to immediately release the family and drop charges against them.
Amazing.
So that is a voice, first off, within Malaysia. So they were telling us, forget it, nobody in Malaysia is going to touch this subject. You know, it's a done deal. And so it happens that there was a voice within Malaysia, and like I said, it happens to be the most credible organization in the world on human rights, deciding, even though, Alia, they don't take on issues of religious freedom in Malaysia because of the current climate, but this case they took. The case of the Ansar of Imam Mahdi they took, and they made that statement. And what happened is, at the beginning you had a space in the media that was completely controlled by the religious authorities. Now, when Amnesty Malaysia made that statement, the local news and local press now covered the news, and now they had another voice in the media that is now countering the religious authorities. So I think incredible. It's huge, because that's again the point. They thought that's just going to be unchallenged. They thought nobody's going to talk about it. But here, their own media now is adopting, and it's covering.
And has to cover it, because Amnesty International is making a statement. They cannot just pretend it didn't happen. They cannot ignore it. They have to have something to say about it. And
exactly.
What a great
so
thing is
I think this is really a divine intervention, how God just turned things around. Amazing. You know. And you know what I was thinking? It's really, they really portrayed Zulkifli as a criminal, and they really made it a point to humiliate him like that in the media.
Yes.
And so now with that statement, the fingers now were against them. With the statement of Amnesty International, and with that now a different voice in the media, it is them who are now pushed in that corner where they are defamed, where they are being told that what they're doing is against the Constitution.
Exactly.
And they are the ones who now need to find a way to, you know, like they say, save face.
Exactly.
And they are now in that hot seat. And I think it's just... like I said, God is jealous over his people, and these are people who believed in the words of Prophet Muhammad.
And claimed to. People who claim to follow the Quran that says, La ikraha fi din, there's no compulsion in religion.
Exactly.
And they're parading an innocent old man around like that. For sure, God was going to have something to do about that, and he did.
Yeah.
By getting the biggest human rights organization involved, Amnesty International, my goodness.
And I think it's going to be more than that, Alia. I think what's going to happen now with the case of Zulkifli, I know that after that statement from Amnesty International, and with the lawyers that we're working with, they think that this is a case of public interest, and they think that you know, this needs to be portrayed in the media to challenge really the authority of religious leaders in Malaysia. So
absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing, because for us as a religion, we believe that a religion is a religion that makes the world better for everyone, not just for its own people. And you've seen our members in Malaysia, the people who went and did a solidarity protest in Malaysia for LGBTQ members. That was a show of solidarity for other persecuted minorities. And I think this is what I think will happen, is that NGOs in Malaysia now, because of that public case, will use that to really challenge the authority of religious authorities or religious leaders in Malaysia, and really question the right that they give themselves to speak in the name of God and to terrorize and control and criminalizes anyone who dares to interpret religion in a different way than them.
It's so they've set the precedent, we can say. They've set the standard where they're saying that now we will speak up for the sake of these oppressed members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And in doing so, they're probably going to be giving courage to others to also be vocal about it, speak out about it. That's amazing. That's really great news.
Yes,
and I also really love how in this religion, we've seen it time and again, where while we support and stand by our persecuted members, God allows that we open the door to other persecuted people as well, and they get relief in the process.
Exactly, because there's so many courageous voices in Malaysia that are calling towards that this false authority of religious establishment has to be challenged. But I think now with that case, it really opens the door to see that what one member of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light had to go through, and also his courage and his defiance. So as you see in the footage, he was, even though he was in handcuffs, he had his finger up.
Such a beautiful stance he had. It was so inspiring.
Yes. So I think this is going to be a very big case, and I think that it would really bring to the forefront the main thing that we've been saying, al-bay'a lillah, or the allegiance is to God, means that only the man of God can speak in the name of God, and religious scholars who are not appointed by God have no right, no business to legislate, interpret, or define the words of God.
Absolutely, and Hadil, this is so encouraging to hear. It's such a breath of fresh air, and it really shows that hope is on the horizon, that change is very near, and hopefully together, and by making those efforts of talking and speaking out and helping one another, standing with one another, we can make the world a better place. Absolutely. So again, we're so grateful to Amnesty International. Thank you so much for being actively involved and working so hard for all of our persecuted members around the world. You're always there to make sure that their voices are heard, standing by the side of the riser Abu Sadiq. Thank you so much for that, and thanks for tuning in today with us.
Thank you so much, Ali. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Back to the studio.
Once again to Amnesty International, and we see from what we're hearing from Sister Hadil right there that there is a very huge change, a turn in the tide when it comes to the media representation of what is taking place right now, and that pressure of the media having to cover the fact that there is another side to the story, that Zulkifli is not in fact a heretic that deserves punishment, but rather from another perspective and a more just perspective, an innocent old man who did nothing wrong to anyone and is simply sitting in his house believing that allegiance is to God alone. And on that basis, after living a life of serving his fellow man, he was harassed, raided and persecuted and imprisoned. This perspective that is much more clear and much more just in its narrative is now being propagated thanks to Amnesty International standing up for the truth. So that's what happens when you try to speak for the truth, when you don't stick to being conforming to society, you actually can make a difference.
Yeah, no, it was really nice to hear those you and Hadil have that conversation. It just brings hope to the fact that in the end times, or in the times before the rise of the Mahdi, his people are being persecuted to the extent that they are in Malaysia. It's absolutely despicable and disgusting. It is something that just really, really angers and upsets me, because this is a key character in their religion. And the Prophet Muhammad spoke about the Mahdi, and the proofs that we have come forward with are completely irrefutable. We have given ample evidence and scriptural references and narrations, hadith from the family of the Prophet Muhammad, as well as from the Prophet Muhammad directly himself, where this eschatological character of the Mahdi has to be obeyed And what we're doing really is the pharaonic kind of sunnah, which is to persecute and jail and lock up. And this is something that's unacceptable. And to see these international NGOs, human rights organizations and watchdogs come forward and lend support to the supporters of this religion is truly a great thing. And long may it continue, and may we increase in our future collaborations.
Absolutely. If anyone out there is listening to this and believes that they want to be part of something better, wants to understand more what this religion is about, and wants to stand for what we stand for, which is pledging allegiance to God alone, if you consider yourself someone who loves God, who is loyal to Him, and is ready to do anything from the love that you have for your Lord, for our Creator, then guess what? You really have to read The Goal of the Wise. If you haven't done it already, a lot of people out there who even believe in this call are hesitating to read it because they think to themselves, no, I'll read it later. But don't do that. Don't take a long time in reading The Goal of the Wise. It has to be something that you read and understand, and it will change your life forever. Read The Goal of the Wise and check out the Mahdis Manifesto and see for yourselves why it is that we are such staunch believers in this call.
Yes, destiny truly changes when you open the first page of this book and you read the words of the riser of the family of Muhammad as he takes us on an unforgettable journey from the beginning of the human existence on this planet in the form of the story of Adam, and how he navigates through that story at every junction, kind of emphasizing the important lesson that it is God and God alone who is the King of Kings, who appoints a man of his choosing, who fits the purposes, the best purposes of the people. And this is a book that will transform, it will change you inside and out. It will really, really take off that VR headset that has been fastened and screwed onto your head by the powers that be, who wish to enslave you, who wish to tax you, who wish to keep you quiet and in conformity with the law of the jungle. And Abu Sadiq is the man who comes inspired by God, and he is the one who is coming to break these shackles, to remove these VR headsets, and to show you things as they really are, and to show you a world without borders and boundaries, and to show you a world where your children and generations will prosper and live together in peace and harmony.
We really enjoyed this conversation today for today's episode, and we will be joining you again tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock UK time, right here on Rise Up. So make sure you're there, and until tomorrow morning, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.